My name is Melanie Nerona. I'm a senior manager for policy and insights at Economist Impact, and I'm pleased to be leading today's session on managing risk across the sustainability landscape. Now, Economist Impact leads a lot of conversations, a lot of discussions and research on various facets of sustainability. So we look at food security through our Global Food Security Index, and we look at water security as well through Water Optimization Index. And we're thrilled to be here at the Infosys Pavilion to be having this discussion today on risk. Now, Infosys is Economist Impact's partner on the Sustainability Project, their digital innovation partner. And the Sustainability Project is really our home for our sustainability research, where we're really building this community of leaders who are interested and leading the initiatives on sustainability. So our discussion today will really focus, given all of the risks we're seeing, how will governments and businesses prioritize sustainability, or are we at risk of putting it on the back burner? So to join me in this discussion, I am pleased to welcome on stage James McCall, Chief Sustainability Officer at HP, Rodney Clark, VP and Chief Commercial Officer at Johnson Controls, and Jasmeet Singh, EVP and Global Head of Manufacturing at Infosys. Let me get on here. Fantastic. So thank you so much for joining me in this discussion. I'm sure it'll be an exciting one. Really looking forward to all of your perspectives on this issue. So James, let me start with you. We talked a little bit earlier about risk, about the plethora of risks that companies are facing, that governments are facing. How are companies thinking about sustainability in all of this? Are they still prioritizing it? And how are you thinking about it at HP?
I think in today's world, that's a very valid question in the sense of businesses, governments, we all have so many competing priorities. How do you choose which is the most important to work on? And for us, it comes back to our values and our principles. Sustainability is not something new that we started a few years ago. It's not something that goes up and down with the tides. It's something that has been core to the way that we think about our products and the impact we want to have on the world around us. But I think even more importantly than just your company's principles and values, we all have to stay true to our customers. And our customers have been clear that they want sustainable options. They want their dollars to make a difference. And so we've been tracking this over the last few years, and it's not just us saying that customers want it. We've seen it grow in our business value. So 3 years ago, we tracked that it was $1 billion the first year. This is bids where sustainability has a meaningful impact in the bid decision, right? So whether it's your circular materials, whether it's energy efficiency or energy certifications, whether it's your human rights, the way you're responsibly sourcing. So the first year, $1 billion. The second year, that grew to 1.6. The next year, this last year, was $3.5 billion. So there's very few things in our portfolio that are growing at that speed. And so I think it's imperative that sustainability is smart business. It is the way that we're going to market, whether it's supply chain resilience, whether it's sales, whether it's consumers, it is part of our core.
So clearly at a time of uncertainty, it seems like sustainability is actually providing growth, the growth that companies are seeking. So that's a really interesting perspective. Rodney, I want to come to you as well. You work with a lot of your clients to help them achieve their sustainability goals. What are you hearing from your clients? How are they thinking about sustainability? Again, are they prioritizing it, or are you seeing them saying, okay, not right now, not for the moment, let's look at other issues in the business first?
Yeah, I'm at Johnson Controls, and at the core of what we do is focus on healthy and sustainable buildings. And we've been in this business for 140 plus years, innovating on in-room comfort and control. Over the years, that's evolved into, how do we take the various systems that are actually operating the building, things like HVAC systems, security systems, fire, building management systems, and provide a level of understanding, or in this case, data, that allows the customer to make decisions about how they ultimately manage their environments. The reason I start with that is that buildings are responsible for 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. And in order for us to truly address this as a broader ecosystem, we have to address the opportunity that sits within buildings. And so as the sustainability agenda has evolved and developed, we have customers that are asking us questions. How do I connect all of these things together? How do I get the level of insight and data that allows me not only to see the information on the dashboard, but take action on the data and information that I'm getting? And so the millions of customers that we have connected with over the years and currently, this is an agenda item for them, a priority for them. And we have invested in the last 2 years, 2.5 years in a digital technology, OpenBlue. It's a platform that connects all of these different systems and allows the customer to do exactly what I mentioned earlier. And so our conversations with customers are perhaps a little different than what you're going to hear on my left and right, because it's core to what they are doing. And they are looking for us to provide not only leadership in terms of thought, but also a path to help them reach and establish some of the goals.
Sure, but just to follow up on that, where are they seeing the value? Is it the cost reduction? Is it the efficiency in the business? Is sustainability driving all of that?
Yeah, we have over the last since 2002, we've helped customers reduce over 36 million tons of carbon. Right. We've saved $6 billion across those same customers. And so when you look at it, they're saying not only help us identify, but help us put the solutions in place in order so that we can get to and take this run from a carbon intensive building to an energy saving building to something that's net zero. And so what we're getting from our customers is how do we help them along that journey? And things like our OpenBlue platform enables that. Our core expertise in the systems that run the building, HVAC, fire, security, building management controls, puts us in a great position to support them.
Great. Thank you so much, Rodney. Jasmeet, I want to get your thoughts as well along the same lines about risk. How do you think about sustainability risk amid all of the other risks? Just your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Melanie. And first of all, it's great to be here on the panel with my co-panelists here. I just wanted to say, first of all, that our journey at Infosys on sustainability actually started in 2011. So we made a commitment to be carbon neutral in 2020. And we actually achieved that goal in 2020. So it's not something that started anew. And I would also like to cite that recently Infosys did a survey on the ESG radar. And one of the things that we found was that ESG is actually a money maker, right? So I think we are talking a lot about risk, but there's clear evidence. We did a survey of about 2,565 participants across the globe. There was clear correlation that a 10% increase in ESG spending actually results in a 1% increase in profit growth. So I just want to pivot this a little bit. And I also want to take this opportunity in our sustainability journey. Like I said, we are carbon neutral in 2020. Johnson Controls is a client as well as a big partner to us. We have 50 million square feet of campuses in India, and 25 million of those are LEED 3 certified. And Johnson Controls equipment, including the OpenBlue solution, actually powers a lot of that journey that we have been on amongst other partners as well. So clearly, I would just want to state that, while there are risks, and the way I would look at risk is really fourfold. It's the long-term risk. There's the innovation. So innovation is in terms of evolution of technologies coming together where you can actually power, revenue growth. You can actually achieve cost reductions. All of these things coming together. And that's where even solutions like what Rodney talked about, OpenBlue, come into play. There is also the opportunity that one needs to look at, which is how can we take it forward as well? How can we actually monetize this? In their business, that is core to them. It's a revenue generator. For others, you can harness that and actually achieve your goals.
And what about Infosys?
Yeah, so that, like I said, we are looking at this in a big way. We are already carbon neutral. We have a 2030 ESG vision as well. I'll give you 2 examples. Our focus has been waste and electricity, really. And we recycle 100% of our water. And electricity, we have a 60 megawatt solar power plant as well that powers the energy. We are, I believe, about 50+% in terms of renewable sources of energy that we use. So we've been on this journey where we've been hitting scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emission targets as well, and achieving those goals.
Great.
If I could just add one thing, I think we talk a lot about companies, right? We talked a lot about the buildings, the facilities, the companies, but in today's hybrid world, it's your home as well, right? I mean, where are you using your PC at? Where are you using your printer at? You're using it at your house. I know my PC spends more time at my house or on an airplane than it does anywhere else. And so, when we can offer a device that's 30, 40, 50% more efficient than it was several years ago, you impact not only the footprint of that device, but people's pocketbook, right? People's wallet, because we all know in today's energy pricing, it starts to make a difference. And we're seeing that with a lot of companies as well. The same as they're investing in business infrastructure and buildings and facilities infrastructure, they're also investing in upgrades for their employees' homes that are going to give them the technology they need to reduce their footprint at home.
And that's the best way to demonstrate value, right? Yeah. So that's fantastic. Rodney, I wanted to ask you a little bit about innovative models that you're using at Johnson Controls to really reduce risk for customers a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things that we hear from our customers, at least on the outset, is that and it's a misconception that this is an expensive journey. That's a barrier. It's potentially a risk that they identify early on. It's a complex set of evaluation when you go to look at, in our case, all these systems in the building and connect them, and ultimately how do you do it, and then how do you think about turning an asset like a building that used to be an expense to you into something that's actually a strategic asset for you. In fact, the most important asset as it relates to the conversation that we're talking about now. So we have a model that we've used and developed where we go in and take our customers through an 8-step process, basically, that gets us awareness up front. It gets us an evaluation of their systems and all of their core technologies that they have, many of which, because of the way that buildings have been built traditionally, these systems don't talk to each other today. Your HVAC system would have no reason to connect to your building management system and have no reason at all to connect. So we do an assessment of all of these and ultimately get to a point where we make recommendations on how to deploy, and then ultimately show them how to record and report. As we take them through that process, we also offer a set of financing so that we are delivering for them an outcome. We're delivering energy savings. We are delivering, potentially a path to net zero, indoor air quality. And so we found, to help minimize and take the risk out of this, that we would take on a burden with our customers and finance the outcome over 10, 15 years. And what we found is that, we're delivering 20 to 25 to 30% efficiency in that process. And so we've got, over 600 plus customers that are involved and engaged in this and today that we use as a basis. And this is a business and an opportunity for our customers and for Johnson Control, as well as our partners, that's just been growing every year. And we expect that to be a way that we apply, some very unique and non-conventional ways to helping support something that's so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. I think models like this will really help sort of you meet them halfway and trying to get more people on board here and really thinking, again, about risk differently. So that's fantastic. I want to talk a little bit more, James, about the conversations you have within the business, right? Often there will be resistance from within the business when sustainability is at odds with business growth goals. How should managers think about that, and how should business leaders navigate those conversations?
I think as a business leader, you have to look at the overall impact to your business, right? So you talked about the risk side of it and why do we need to respond to risk and to regulations. Many markets, sustainability, human rights, digital equality, they're becoming mandatory, right? So we're moving out of this voluntary market space into a mandatory market space where if you want to have access to the European Union, if you want to have access to Asia, if you want to have access to the US, you're going to have to meet certain standards to be able to do that. So I can argue the business side of it, but actually one of the conversations that I would take us back to is as we think about recruiting and attracting the next generation of talent, I've seen surveys that would say literally as many as 85% of new leaders coming out of university would take a pay cut to work at a company that feel like can make a difference, right? That's a responsible company, that's a company that's having an impact on the world around us. If I want to recruit the best, the brightest, if I want to help have that next generation of innovators, I've got to have a company where they want to belong, where they feel like their job is more than a job, it's more than a paycheck, it's innovating for the world. And so I think if you look at your overall business values, you look at the talent of the people you're coming in, you look at what your customers, the $3.5 billion I talked about, I don't want to walk away from $3.5 billion. And so if you think about all those things together, it makes sustainability and kind of overall environmental social governance an imperative, right? It's a must-have.
Absolutely. I do want to open the floor for questions in a few minutes, so do have a think about any questions that you want to ask our panelists. But Jasmeet, maybe I'll come to you with the next question. As we're thinking about risk, we need to, in order to manage sustainability risk, in order to reach our goals, we all need to work together. So do companies need to support sustainability initiatives beyond just beyond their organization as well, to go beyond just what you're looking at on a day-to-day basis?
No, absolutely. I think it's there in the communities. It's leveraging partnerships. It's leveraging the countries that you're operating in. So it has to come together to be able to achieve the significant amount of goals that we have. So I absolutely see that. I will also say that just going back to for a moment and commenting on what James said is, and I'll cite the survey again, that there is clear evidence in the survey that when you have a chief sustainability officer, certain roles, you have the ESG committees, and you have capital. More importantly, see, you can talk about this in partnering together, but once you actually allocate capital flows to the chief sustainability officer, there's evidence that actually you see again a percentage point growth when you have all these four elements in play. So there's clear evidence. Once you give that, then you unleash the ability to actually work across communities, work across partners, work across countries as well to drive that agenda and the goal.
Fantastic. Rodney, I wanted to get your thoughts as well on partnerships. What is your organization doing in terms of partnering with governments, with other supply chain partners, to really achieve these goals?
Yeah, there is no progress in this area without partnership. And the public sector, private sector partnership is one that's critically important. If you look at the origin of a lot of our sustainability initiatives, they were primarily public sector led. Recently, in the last couple of years, you've had the formation of so many different committees across so many different countries that are focused on this. CEOs coming together to establish a common set of opinions and goals to also then work in partnership with the public sector to push us and move us forward. Those are the types of things that are going to be important. And then it's important for the companies who've invested in sustainability to continue to share their agendas with each other. I heard a UN comment, I think it was from this gentleman earlier. It's a great study that was just published by Accenture and the UN around the focus of CEOs, a CEO study, 2,600 some odd CEOs, and you have sustainability there as a top concern, talent development that James mentioned, like how do we re-recruit and bring new talent and capability in. All of these things require partnerships. That's at the higher level. Then we get down to the implementation, and no one company, no two companies can go in alone and create a solution for a customer. So as Jasmeet talked about, some of the relationship and connection that we have is going out and not only helping each other, but helping our joint customers through great software technology, understanding, building capability, and then through integration. And then we leverage HP for their core capability. So partnership is like absolutely foundational to this.
Absolutely. Just me.
If I may just add to Rodney's comment also on just the supply chain aspect of it, right? Because I think there is a lot that is talked about the significance of the supply chain. And again, here I'm going to cite the survey. And if you haven't looked at it, please do look at the Infosys ESG Radar survey that we did. On the supply chain side, 99% of the executives that we interviewed they all said supply chain is extremely important, that we need to dive in. But guess what? Only 37% actually go and renegotiate contracts with their supply chain partners to actually embed sustainability goals into them, right? So there is still a lot of progress that needs to be done in that area itself to bring it up.
What do you think is holding that back from renegotiating those contracts? Is it the lack of sustainable, like ESG compliant suppliers? Is it is it a lack of information about certain metrics that you need when evaluating suppliers? What do you think is holding that back?
I think it's a mix of all of these things. And if one thing that the pandemic has taught us is that your supply chain needs to be resilient. You need to be looking at alternatives. And I think that's a healthy direction, a healthy step in the right direction, because now you can actually have those conversations because you have already identified or are in the progress of identifying other companies that can actually step in case they are not going to adhere to your sustainability targets and goals, right? Almost every company has now got an agenda in terms of where they want to be in their sustainability targets. They cannot get there without the help of the supply chain. And so I think the time is right now to actually have these conversations, but it's difficult work. I mean, Johnson Controls itself in their supply chain would have so many partners across the globe that actually are feeding into the company. So it's not an easy task. There's data issues that you need to actually drive. So all of those things that you cited are going to be key here.
Absolutely, it's a slow journey, but an important one. James, I wanted to ask you as well to share some thoughts on supply chain sustainability risk. How are you thinking about it? Maybe what are the challenges you're facing? Tell us what's at the center of your supply chain sustainability management.
Well, I'm actually going to change our topic just a tad because one of the things we've not talked about yet, and I think it really goes back to risk and sustainability, is the human element, right?
Right.
So, if you think about it's environmental and social governance, right? So we kind of forget about the S. It's the silent S sometimes in ESG. And so for us, it's all about the people. Whether you think about the climate side of it, we're protecting the planet for the 8 billion people that share the planet.
Right.
But when I think about the supply chain, a lot of it comes back to human rights, making sure that we're responsibly sourcing. And in today's world, that is risk mitigation as well. So not only are you doing the right thing, are you giving people a voice, are you helping enable workers and train workers and make sure they understand and are respected with their rights, but if you think about forced labor laws and the shift from mandatory to regulatory type of laws, and it's not just the regulatory aspect of it. A lot of our customers are now asking us deeper questions. What is your tier 1, your tier 2, your tier 3 supply chain? Not just where was this PC assembled, where were the components sourced out of? Where did those come from? Because it starts to impact their risk, right? It starts to impact their footprint and what they have to report depending on which country they're in. And so the work that we've been doing for decades with the Responsible Business Alliance, with our parties, like you said, it's a team sport, right? So we work directly with our competitors, directly with other partners to raise the human rights element across the supply chain, because all ships rise together. And so I think that's an example of where doing the right thing in hard times ends up paying out in the long run, because now the work we've done over the last decade has positioned us to be able to manage that supply chain risk. We're not worried about the upcoming laws and the mandatory reporting because we've been doing reporting for 20 years. Right. We've been doing third-party assurance on our reporting. We've been doing the human rights audits. We've been working with the different competitors. And so I think it gives your company the confidence and your customers the confidence to know that they're sourcing from the right partner.
Right. And so to move ahead, move early on this is important because it's going to come your way anyway at some point. I want to open the floor for questions. Is there anybody who has a question on sustainability, on risk, on the challenges you're facing there to our amazing panelists? Yes, I can see we have 2 questions. The gentleman up here in front, please.
Thanks so much for an amazing panel. Max, I'm building Asia's first digital native carbon registry. So similar to Gold Standard and Vera, but actually built for the digital age. And so a question for both, all 3 panelists actually, how do you see actually the ability for us to embed both the carbon calculation and also the carbon neutrality of products into existing supply chains going forward as a sort of important driver of business? And then specifically on building retrofits, do you see that opportunity actually to create new types of voluntary carbon credits around retrofitting our built environment and reducing energy costs there? Thanks.
The reality is that 70% of the buildings that exist today will be here in 2050, and so this is a massive undertaking to get in and really for these partnerships that we talked about earlier to really get in and work. As we're doing that work, our ability to recognize things in software, by the way, becomes critical. I'm going to answer a part of your question because I'm qualified to only answer a part of your question, and then I'm not qualified to answer another part of your question. I just saw an announcement from my former company, Microsoft, where they announced a technology as part of their Azure stack, as part of their sustainability initiative that we also leverage is Johnson Controls, where they are basically building inside of their software the capability to do carbon offset and program that into the way that like OpenBlue would be leveraging an energy efficient action in a time where there was less tax on the grid. Those are the types of developments that are in play that we're looking at every single day in terms of how do we not only partner, but how do we invest in that capability? So again, that's just part one of so that's how we're thinking about it.
Thank you. I think we had
I can add just one second to that.
Sure.
So we try to be data driven. If I look at my life cycle assessment across scope 1, 2, and 3, it would tell you that 70% of my life cycle comes from our supply chain, right? From the raw materials, the components, the manufacturing, the transportation of our components. A large portion of that supply chain is based in Asia where you're working. We use the LCA data to understand our footprint, but to be able to move towards net zero, we need to go beyond, to be able to start putting supplier specific versus average data in. And so we're constantly working with our suppliers. We've actually gotten and partnered with our top 30 suppliers, which represent a large portion of that footprint. Half of them, 20% of them now have set science-based targets. We've got over 200 suppliers that are now feeding their data up into CDP as part of the CDP supply chain tool. We score an A in CDP for their supply chain work. And that data enables us to go where we need to go, right? And so I think your tool and other tools as they emerge will give us that next generation of data. And so I applaud the work that you're doing, and it would encourage you guys to still move forward because the work is in reducing the footprint, but you need the data to know where to go. So.
James, I want to follow. We talked about this a little earlier about sharing data within the industry, with your peers, with your partners. Is there a resistance to doing that? Because it seems like you have the evidence for this to work. How important is it to share data, and is there any resistance to doing that?
I think the first resistance is as you get further down into some of the smaller companies in your supply chain, they just don't have the data in the first place. So it's not that they're resistant to share it. They just don't have a sustainability team. They don't collect their sustainability data. And so the first step is education. We've partnered with CDP, with the World Wildlife Fund, with groups like Johnson Controls or Schneider Electric or others just to come in and do like building audits and surveys and training and things like that to just educate people. After that, there is some resistance depending on how energy intensive your market is. And so if you're doing final assembly of PCs, it's not that big of a deal because the energy is a small part of your footprint. If I'm a semiconductor manufacturer, manufacturing of high energy semiconductors, it's a little bit more proprietary. And so we're breaking through those barriers around how are smart ways we can share it, how are ways we can get down to the emissions without getting into the proprietary nature of it. I find that if you sit down and have a common conversation, they're reporting it already. They're figuring it out already. How do we come along together and look for opportunities that we move the needle as one? And so typically we can break down those barriers. It's more of a lack of understanding than anything.
Yeah, we're going to continue this conversation later. But before that, the lady at the back, you have a question for us, please?
Hi, thank you for this interesting panel. My name is Rukan. I'm from the UN Capital Development Fund. And we've heard that partnerships are important. We heard about the survey that ESG is not about risk management only, but it can actually generate profits. What we see in our work, and we work a lot with the private sector and the finance sector directly, is there's still a challenge in terms of changing the mindsets and coming together. And especially this notion that ESG is not just about risk, but it can actually drive profit. We don't see that. What we see a lot is, we still see a lot of greenwashing. We see companies who have sustainability officers, but when you talk to them, they really struggle a lot internally because they're loners, and it's really hard to be part of the decision-making process. So I see a huge challenge there, how we can bring these two worlds together in a way that we move into the same direction really with conviction and commitment, and not just for reputation reasons or greenwashing. So I would like to hear from the panelists. How do you think we can really break that and change this? Thank you.
Okay, I'll take a shot at it. So first of all, I completely agree with you. I think the good thing is there is progress already being made. So if I were to just cite Nike as an example, then it's a great example. They talk about revenue growth and profitability, not despite sustainability, but because of sustainability. As more companies actually come up doing this, I think you will see a change. The other thing, I think your comment on greenwashing and the mindset change, I think is a very pertinent one. I'll again cite something that we saw in the survey that we had done. When you embed actually sustainability and actually ESG goals in the C-suite, see, most of the companies now have an ESG committee. It's still not there at the C-suite, right? And that's where the accountability is not there. And when you start embedding that, again, there's clear evidence that once you do that, you actually see profit revenue growth, right? So I think it'll come together. And it is a change in process, right? It's a change that is being driven surely, and it will happen.
Yeah, I guess to build on his comments, so using HP as an example, we have it embedded at the top, both at the board and within our executive compensation. But the more powerful impact is we have 50,000 employees around the world that, as part of their end of year work, can actually set a sustainable impact goal, right? Whether I want to work in digital equality and I want to help close the gap in communities, I can go in and be a school after school counselor. I can help coach a NGO. Maybe I'm in finance and I'm going to help them write their new business proposal or other things like that. There's a million ways that you can engage. Maybe I'm designing the next circular material, or I'm designing energy efficiency. So we get our employees to sign up and to build their equity back in, and it shows and it reflects. I mean, the sustainability engagements we do, what we post online, they're some of the highest read in the company. They're some of the ones that people repost the most. They're some of the ones that they get most passionate about and they engage on. And so when you make sustainability everyone's job, my job is really to become the chief cheerleader, right? I'm to cheer them on. I'm to encourage that work, to make sure we're working in the meaningful places, to make sure that we're having a meaningful impact. But at the end of the day, it's driven by our customer demands. We all work for the customer. So the customer tells us what they want, and they want sustainable products. The business is there to serve that need, and our employees are pumped about it, right? They're excited to make an impact in the world around them. So I think if you look at the companies that are making the biggest difference, it's the ones that have moved sustainability from being a central function to being everyone's job across the business unit.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, James. Again, I think I really appreciate that point about making sure there's a structured communication plan within the business as well, so that you're all champions and all representing that. Are there any more questions, sir? I think you had raised your hand earlier.
Yes. Actually, some of them have already been asked and answered, so thank you very much for that. Maybe one little follow-up question on what we discussed before, and coming back to what James said at the beginning, the built environment, obviously 40% of greenhouse gas emissions, but it's not just commercial buildings, it's also residential buildings. And we know 70% of buildings that are here today will be there in 2050, perhaps even more true in residential areas than in commercial buildings. So when will we get to net zero overall in the built environment on current trends, and what could be done, including by building additional partnerships and including with the government sector, in order to accelerate that process?
Yeah, it's a journey, and net zero in the built environment, with goals established and each company taking on their own, will take on different forms depending on where you are, based on regulatory, based on local commitment, based on company commitment. I also, residential. I'm coming to residential now because residential plays a pretty significant role in it as well. And you look at something like, again, in my area, heat pump can be a small residential unit, or it can be a large district deployment of a heat pump. We're able to bring more, energy efficiency, generate more energy for less power at the residential level, which puts less tax on the local grid. So all of these things are in play. And for our company, although I spoke primarily in commercial terms today, we also have that residential concern. We're one of the largest, not in fact the largest residential heat pump supplier in the world at this point. And so it's a pretty significant focus and push for us. And I'm going to cheat a little bit. I know you're going to respond because I wanted to add one thing to the previous question, which is what James pointed out. All of these companies coming together, and the CEOs and the roundtables, the SMIs and the BRTs, are establishing a common set of criteria, a common set of principles that slowly will find their way through large corporations and ultimately adopted by all. Employee engagement, C-suite, accountability. We have a resource group inside of our company that's 16,000 employees strong. Between that resource group and the people who have goals that can go out and do that, it was net by virtue of companies talking together and leaders talking together. So sorry, I just wanted to point that out as progress. You're going to take us back to
well, I mean, building off what you said, I mean, one of the easiest things, I was having a conversation with a gentleman from the White House, and I used schools as an example. I said, one of the easiest things you can do, build sustainable specifications into your bid packages, right? And they don't need to be sustainable expectations that work just for HP. It's okay if Apple wins or Dell wins or Lenovo wins. I just want you to raise the bar, right? Because if we raise the bar together, that uses less energy, right? It puts less strain on his buildings. It puts less strain on the overall grid. And so I think one of the easy actions we as companies can take is put your dollars to work. Raise the bar for us, make us push harder, make us go further. And I think as we do that, that helps impact the overall sustainable design. We can design the best PC in the world or the best print in the world. If no one buys it, then it didn't actually reduce the footprint. And so I think we've got to change that mindset that sustainability is somehow more expensive. And we need to become to where, just like you referenced with Nike, if it's not sustainable, it wasn't really innovative enough in the first place, is the way that Nike looks at it, right? And so they challenge their teams. If you're really innovators, if you're really driving R&D, give me a lower, smaller footprint for this new device, for this new footprint, for this new shoe, this new shirt. And I think that's the way that all companies should start to work, is how do I make sure each investment is having a positive impact on the world around me?
Thank you so much, James. I think that's such a wonderful sentiment to close this session on. Thank you so much to our lovely panelists here today for really, I think, emphasizing the value of sustainability so that we shift away from looking at it as risk, but an opportunity for growth. So thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to our audience for being so engaged. And thank you to Infosys for hosting us here today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.